Good morning, everyone. Please sit down. Oh, after we have had the prayers, I apologise. Sorry, John, please go ahead.
Let's pray. Father God in heaven, you are God and we are not. Our lives are limited by length of days, by power, by knowledge. In these things and many other ways we are limited. But in these ways and many other ways you absolutely exceed us. You are eternal, you are all-powerful, you know all things. And Lord God, because we are limited and because you are not, help us to seek your ways, to seek your leading and guidance, to seek your will for us as the people that you have made. Father, we thank you that you have given us what we need to know of how we are to live and to lead in the different roles that you have given us. You have spoken through the prophet Micah, saying that we are to act justly, to love mercy, and to live humble lives with you. And so, Father, we pray that you will help us in seeking to do what is right and seeking to care for those who are in need. We thank you that we see these things most clearly through your Son, Jesus Christ. Thank you that he demonstrated what it is to act justly in always doing what is right, and loving mercy in showing compassion and care for those who are in need. Thank you that he lived that perfect life in union with you. And we thank you that in him we have that source of forgiveness, so that all of our failings can be taken away through faith in him. And we thank you that having been forgiven by him, we can be enabled by your Spirit to live lives that are pleasing to you. And so now we pray for this time of decision-making and leadership, this act of leadership, that you will guide us and help us to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with you. We pray these things through your Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, who rules over all. Amen.
Members, I'm sure many of you are aware that Councillor Evelyn Winfield of Cwmbran Community Council, their former leader, died very recently, and her funeral will be next Monday. Would you all like to stand for a minute's silence? Thank you. I'd like to remind you all that the council meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so we are all on camera. Please be aware you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking, and please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. This meeting is available to view online now and in the future whenever and wherever people want to watch it. There's no need, therefore, for any other filming of the meeting to take place. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I've had no requests this morning for people to speak Welsh, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. I'd like to welcome everyone attending the meeting today and also anyone watching via the webcast. Please can you ensure that all mobile phones and other noisy devices are put on silent. Should there be an emergency alarm, follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic car park. If we do have any motions or amendments during the meeting, I will need them to be clear, please, before we go to the vote. The attendance register is going round. Please can all members sign it and send it on. So we move now to agenda item 2, apologies for absence. Dominic Redmond, do you have any apologies, please?
I've had apologies from Councillors Mary Barnett, Pamela Cameron, Glyn Caron, Alan Burzer, Keith James and Graham Smith.
Members, are there any other apologies, please? Councillor Burnett. Declarations of interest, agenda item 3. Monitoring officer, do you have any advice for members, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No specific advice on the agenda before you today, members, but obviously if you have questions, I'm here to answer them.
Members, do you have... Oh, Councillor Clark. Sir.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Granddaughter across Kellyach School, item 9.
Item 9, you have to help me, Councillor Clark. That's in relation to announcements from the leader, is it? Is that in the Cabinet decisions that are here for noted? And I think you would have already declared that, or you would, I think you gave your apologies for that particular Cabinet meeting.
That's fine. I wasn't at Cabinet, so I gave my apologies, but now I'm making sure that you're aware that I have a granddaughter there.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. So that's noted, just as a personal interest. Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Linda. It's just around the council tax reduction scheme. Family member that is receiving council tax reduction. I assume that I should make an interest, declare an interest.
You know, it's quite, it's somebody that's within your household, to be a very close associate, and it has to be within the 3 areas of discretion that the council is being asked to make a decision. Would it fall within those, Councillor Evans?
Yes, I believe it would.
It would. So are you going to note a personal interest, given that there'd be a lot of people that would be affected by the proposed there?
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you. Can you make sure any interests are also written on the normal form, please? So we move to agenda item 4, which is on page 5, the minutes of the 13th of December. Can someone move that the minutes are correct, please? Thank you. Are we all agreed? Right. Thank you, members. We also have minutes from the 11th of January. Could someone please move those are correct? Thank you. Are we all agreed? Thank you, members. So page 39, agenda item 6, is an update on actions. The updates on what have been done to implement our previous decisions start on this page. Do you have any comments or questions, please? Councillor Harris.
Just the one. The second one down on the 4th of March, there's an asterisk at the end of meetings about paperless meetings, and then the asterisk says at the end that it would be removed from the following list on the 20th of September 2016.
Dominique, can you answer this one at all, please?
Yeah, I can remove it if it needs updating, that's fine.
Thank you.
Is everyone happy to note the updates? Thank you, members. They are noted. Receipt of petitions, agenda item 7. No petitions have been submitted this morning, so we'll move on to public question time. There are no public questions, so we will move on again. And we come to announcements, agenda item 9. Chief Executive, Leader, could you start, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Pontypool RFC on their cup victory over Llanelli at Parker Scarlets at the weekend. It was very impressive if anyone saw it on S4C, both on the pitch and in the stands, and is a continued sort of success from their unbeaten run in the Championship so far. I've heard today that if Pontypool are drawn at home in the second round, there's going to be free entry to people, so I'd encourage people to get down there and support Pontypool if they're drawn at home. I recognise that Pontypool are just one of the great sports clubs in Torvheim, but I think it's worthy of recognition in the Chamber today. I think it being their first ever cup victory over Llanelli. Second of all, I'd like to thank people for their response to my appeal on Twitter. I put a message out there saying I was willing to get out and about and listen to businesses and voluntary groups in the borough, because I believe they're the backbone of our communities. So thank you to all those who've responded and those who I've been able to get out and about and see. And please feel free to get in touch if you'd like me to come and see you. Thirdly, I'd just like to draw members' attention to the email that was sent out yesterday regarding the Spring Clean, which we're running in conjunction with Keep Wales Tidy. That could be a great initiative to help deliver on one of the priorities that we've set in our corporate plan. So I'd encourage members to get involved and to speak with community groups in their wards. Next, I'd like to thank everyone who took part in the Holocaust Memorial Day service, both Canon Pippin, Johnny Rain, who's here today, and all those who took part. I was especially impressed by the performances from the young people from our schools, and it really was a fitting tribute and commemoration of such an awful event. So I'd like to thank everyone who's involved in that. And lastly, I'd just like to associate myself with the comments made by the Mayor in regards to Evelyn Winfield. I'm sure all members would share in giving her the best wishes to her family. Evelyn was someone who contributed so much to public services and to the council in Cwmbran over the years, and we'd like to pay our respects. Also to Bernard Gibbs, who died recently and was part of Pontypool Older People's Forum. He was another person who gave a lot of voluntary time on behalf of the community. And to Mike Black, whose funeral is today, from the Pontypool Veterans Association. I think it's right that we pay tribute in council to people who are involved in our community, who help to make our community strong. So I'd just like to make that tribute to him and to pay our respect to his family too.
Thank you, Leader. Chief Executive, do you have any announcements, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have the sad task today of announcing that our Chief Legal Officer and Monitoring Officer, Linda Willis, will be retiring from the Council in February, and that this will be her last Council meeting. Linda is a stalwart, having worked for the Council for the last 20 years, and in her current role for the last 12 years. She's contributed a huge amount to this organisation in that time, and is a very valued member of the Council's leadership team, and a trusted advisor to the Leader, Cabinet and members in general. The role of the monitoring officer requires a very special type of person if it's to be done well, and Linda has certainly done it well. They are the guardian of the proper governance and conduct of the Council, and they must have the wisdom of Solomon, the patience of a saint and the tenacity of a bulldog. And Linda has all those qualities in the nicest possible way. If I could sum up Linda in one word, it would be integrity. She's trusted by everyone and her values are beyond question. I think that everyone who comes into contact with Linda respects her for her depth of experience, her good judgment and her wisdom. She's reflective and considered, never panicking or rushing to judgment on an issue, and so the conclusions she comes to and the advice that she gives are always sound. The fact that the Council recently had such a good corporate assessment from the Wales Audit Office is due in no small part to Linda's oversight of the organisation's governance, which is thorough and careful without being overly restrictive or controlling. Linda is an extremely kind and patient person, even when the demands on her are extreme, which they can be from time to time. She always listens, is very empathetic, and sees everyone's point of view. It's the lot of the monitoring officer to get involved in situations at a time when they become tense and difficult, sometimes when the actual issues concerned can be quite trivial. If Linda has ever been tempted at any time to tell people, both officers and members, to grow up and sort it out, then she's hidden it very well. Her restraint is exemplary, and I've never seen her lose her temper with anyone in all the time I've worked with her, despite considerable provocation on occasions. Linda is living proof of the fact that strength, resilience and determination have nothing to do with shouting and banging the table. The authority that her role carries and her personal gravitas mean that you know exactly when you've overstepped the line and are being quietly but firmly told off. And that applies to the Chief Executive as much as to anyone else, and I'm sure some members in the Chamber can relate to that as well. In terms of squarely facing up to difficult issues, standing her ground, and tenaciously hanging on in there until they're resolved, Linda is one of the strongest people that I know, and all without ever raising her voice or causing offence to anyone. One thing that perhaps not everyone knows about Linda is that she has a very sharp, dry wit and sense of humour, which is much enjoyed by her colleagues on the leadership team. It can suddenly appear to lighten an otherwise dry or serious discussion, like the sun coming out from behind a cloud. We will miss that every bit as much as her tremendous professionalism and knowledge. I know that the leader will want to say thanks to Linda from the point of view of members, so I will leave that to him. But from the perspective of her fellow officers, and particularly the senior leadership team, we are very sorry indeed to be losing a much-loved and respected colleague from our midst. We've tried the tactic of making Linda feel so guilty about leaving us that she will change her mind and stay, but to no avail. She's been a terrific public servant, and she richly deserves a relaxing and fulfilling retirement, which I know she's very much looking forward to. So, Linda, we wish you every happiness and success in whatever you choose to do in the future. We will miss you greatly on so many levels. And with your permission, Madam Mayor, I'll hand over to the leader.
Thank you, Leader.
I'd just like to thank the Chief Executive first for her warm words. It really shows how much Linda's valued by her colleagues, and there can be no higher professional praise than the respect of the people you work side by side with. So I want to pay tribute now to Linda from members too, because it's not easy being a monitoring officer. It's a bit like being a referee. You can never please both sides, and often you have to be prepared to make a decision whether they like it or not. An old colleague and friend of mine, Mo Molam, said once that as long as you're annoying everyone in the same amount, then you're doing something right. That's why I think it's key to have the respect of members in Linda's position, and the respect of members who view you as someone as fair and calm under pressure. And I think members will agree that you've been just that. But Linda's work is much more than just the high-profile stuff. I've also seen her work tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring our governance processes are sound. And perhaps the ultimate testimony to that work was the positive Welsh Audit Office report last year. I certainly saw Linda working behind the scenes to ensure that we were ready for that inspection and that all our processes were up to scratch. Other public sector organisations would certainly have been envious of that work and of the positive bill of health that resulted from it. Not that Linda would have tried to take credit for that herself, as I've always found her to be unassuming and modest, someone who gets the job done rather than shouting loud and making a song and dance of things. Perhaps that's an example to us all. So on behalf of members, I'd like to wish Linda well in her retirement and thank her for all her efforts.
Before Linda says a few words, I believe that there are some other members who would like to say something.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Burnett,
Thank you.
followed by Councillor Rees.
What more can I say than has already been said by the leader, Chief Executive? When I heard a week or two ago that Linda was leaving, I was quite surprised myself. As we all know, Linda, as Chief Executive said, has been a stalwart to this council. She's been the backbone of the legal side of it. The advice she's given to members, and me personally as well, and guided us through times of office during this council. I've never seen anybody so calm and collect when you talk to her, no matter what state you're in. Linda is always there, just calm and collect, and brings you back down to the ground. So Linda, thank you very much for all the years you put in this council, and you have been the backbone for us all, and the help you've given us. And I do thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Councillor Rees and then Councillor Morby.
Well, someone more famous than me once said, "You are remembered for the rules that you break." We are very fortunate members of this council, for the most part, are not too well remembered, and this, in no small part, is down to the quality of advice that you give us, which we are very grateful for. Thank you for all of that, and most importantly, thank you for making a difference to the life outcomes of the people in Torfaen. And with that, on behalf of Plaid Cymru, I wish you good luck and an enjoyable new start.
Councillor Morby, followed by Councillor Mills.
Yeah, I think the leader and the chief executive have said most of what I wanted to say, including the analogy about football referees. But the fact is that many members in this council have a lot to thank Linda for the calm way in which she's dealt with fraught situations which have resulted from members' misbehaviour. Misbehaviour rather than misconduct, I think, is fair to say. We sometimes aren't as well behaved as we ought to be. And I've been very impressed, really, over the years with the way in which Linda has responded quietly and in a manner which actually helps cool things down rather than exacerbate things. Personally, I've had a few encounters with her in terms of her monitoring role, capacity, and she has always treated me with what I thought was respect, and I believe is respect, albeit that I wasn't deserving of it on some occasions. So, on a personal basis, I'm sorry to see Linda go, but I can quite understand her desire to leave at the top of her game and to enjoy a well-deserved retirement with hopefully some fond memories of not only the officers but some of the members within Torfaen whose lives you have helped stay on the short and narrow path rather than go into the quagmire of misconduct which politicians sometimes get involved in. So I've been personally very grateful, and I'm sure members generally have really appreciated the way in which you conducted your role, and I shall miss you.
Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On behalf of myself and my absent colleagues, can I just say, fortunately, I've not had to have an awful lot of contact with Linda, but when I have done, you've always been very efficient, very charming, can I say, and you'll be a sad loss. Thank you.
With all those lovely warm words, would you like to now say your piece?
Well, gosh, thank you, members. I think you've all acknowledged it. It's not easy being a monitoring officer. I think one of my colleagues said you need fortitude, resilience, and a sense of humour. And it's not easy being councillors as well. But fortunately, we've got a mutual interest in keeping everybody out of trouble. And I can say, although inevitably there are always differences of opinions as we go forward, I've always had respect and politeness from members here, and there is an understanding of each other's position as we tackle very technical rules and regulations that bog us down when we want to try and get on with things. Although the duties of an monitoring officer are on an individual's shoulders, you can't perform them unless you've got a supportive officer culture behind you. So I have to pay tribute to the team within which I work. And I count myself very lucky indeed to have to perform a difficult role within the supportive environment that is Torfaen. So I'm grateful to you all for all your support over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think all those comments are very indicative of the framework in which we work, and much of that is due to Linda. So if we continue now, we're looking at page 41, item 10, the Cardiff Capital Region City deal. And Chief Executive Alison, can you present your report to us, please?
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. Follow that, as they say. Very important report, actually, and not as emotional as the last item, but exciting in its own way. There's quite a lot of detail in this report, members. I'm going to take you through the key headlines and then go into some of the detail of it, but obviously there are a number of appendices with a great deal of information in them. Nigel has been involved in every aspect of the financial side of City Deal. He can answer any questions on that that are too technical for me. Linda has been involved in the legal side and similarly can answer any questions. And of course, the leader has been thoroughly engaged in all the politics and I'm sure can answer any political questions. So on that basis, I will take you through the report. There are two key recommendations for today. One is that you agree to the formal establishment of the Cardiff Capital Region Joint Cabinet, which would take the form of a joint committee. And the other is that you approve the joint working agreement, the City Deal Assurance Framework, and the implementation plan, all of which are attached to the report. So if we look at the overarching messages of the City Deal, it's a partnership between the 10 local authorities in South East Wales, from Bridgend to Monmouthshire, including the valleys and the Cardiff coastal region. It's, those authorities are in partnership with the UK Government and Welsh Government, so it's a tripartite agreement to invest £1.2 billion in the economy of the region over a period of 20 years. And the key aim of the fund, one of the key aims anyway, is to create 25,000 new jobs by 2036, and in doing so to leverage in £4 billion worth of private sector investment. So it's a very, very big thing, probably the biggest thing this council's been asked to sign up to, certainly in the time that I've been Chief Executive. And there are two main components to the deal. The bulk of the money, £734 million, is a Welsh Government responsibility, which is for the Metro. I'm sure people have heard a lot about the Metro, but basically it isn't an underground system like London or Paris or one of the big capital cities, but what it is an integrated transport system which allows you to get much more easily around the city region area. The other part of the fund, which is still a substantial amount of £495 million, of which £120 million will be contributed by the 10 councils on a pro rata basis, is available for the joint committee that you're being asked to agree to invest. And there are a number of themes in the implementation plan, although they are broad themes at the moment, around business, innovation, digital, skills, housing and infrastructure. Any project that goes through that gateway must be strategic in nature, so it won't be little projects, it'll be big pieces of investment, and they must contribute to raising GVA, which is a technical term, but effectively, the way I think of it, is raising the prosperity of the Cardiff City region. And so the Joint Cabinet that you're being asked to approve will be responsible for this element of the investment. So the Joint Cabinet will sit above a governance structure, so it will be the top of the pyramid, if you like, and beneath that there will be a Skills and Employment Board, a Regional Transport Authority, a Regional Economic Growth Partnership, which will be basically the voice of the business community, and the Joint Cabinet will work alongside Welsh Government and also the Department of Work and Pensions, because the skills element of City Deal is very significant. Now, as part of preparing for the City Deal, the Joint Cabinet, while sitting in shadow, has commissioned an Independent Growth and Competitiveness Commission, which I'm sure you've read about and maybe seen the report of, and they reported in December 2016. If we look very broadly at the recommendations of that report, which are very comprehensive, the key thing is that the direction of travel that the City Deal was already engaged on through the original heads of terms was confirmed by that Commission as the right way to go, the correct way to move forward. So that's very significant in that the ambition of those 10 authorities, together with Welsh Government and UK Government, was the right way to go, according to the Commission. You will see amongst your papers the joint working agreement, which for brevity I'll refer to as the JWA in presenting this report. The JWA is a very, very important document because it sets out the rules under which the City Deal will operate. And one of the things that members need to be aware of when making this decision is that if you agree to that JWA today, it locks in all 10 councils for the first 5 years of the City Deal. So subject to every council agreeing, and obviously these are all going through the mechanism at the moment, if all 10 councils agree in their councils, on the 1st of March coming up, the 10 councils with UK Government and Welsh Government will sign the JWA, and at that point every council is locked in and cannot withdraw and must contribute its share of any expenditure excuse me, that is incurred. Once all councils are locked in and the JWA is agreed, there are only 3 matters which will need to come back to you as a council for approval. And this is something that's been subject to a huge amount of debate amongst the 10 authorities, so it's important that you are very clear about it. One matter is when there is a business plan which sets out a broad framework for investment. So at the moment what you've got is the implementation plan with your papers. That sets out some themes. The business plan will be more specific about how the investment will be put against those themes and what the major elements of investment will be. That business plan will need to come back to all 10 councils for approval. It's what's called a reserved matter. Until it's agreed, the Joint Cabinet can commit up to £50 million, which is about 10% of the non-metro spend. But beyond that, they can't commit expenditure without that business plan being agreed. There are 2 other matters which are also reserved matters. They won't necessarily come back to you unless the situation arises that the City Deal wants to commit expenditure beyond the costs that have currently been agreed. Now, one part of that reserved matter, I've said there are 3, so these are 2 separate reserved matters. One part is around the 120 million capital investment, which we've already mentioned. The other is about the overall affordability. So if you think about it, if you were buying a house, let's say you bought a house for 120,000, because we're talking about 120 million, the price of the house would be the capital investment, the 120 million, but obviously it would cost you more than that to buy the house because you're paying interest on the mortgage. So the affordability envelope is the overall cost, including the income and any carry costs, because UK Government are putting money into the pot. Nigel's the expert on this. If you want to drill down into the detail of that, he will be able to advise you on that. Except in those 3 cases, what you are doing is empowering the Joint Cabinet to make decisions about the non-metro spend of 495 million on your behalf. So that is what you're being asked to do today. It's very important, I think, that members are very clear about that. Just to go into a little bit of background, on the 15th of March of last year, the heads of terms were signed by representatives of the councils and the UK government and the Welsh government. The heads of terms were very broad at that stage because at that time we weren't sure what the city deal was going to look like, and it wasn't committing anybody at that stage, just saying these are the sort of things we want to work together on. So it was the £1.2 billion investment, the creation of a regional transport authority and an agreement to coordinate transport across the region, the development of capabilities in compound semiconductor applications, which might sound quite specific, but it's something that's likely to be something that there will be early investment in, a commitment to work with the Department of Work and Pensions, the creation of a business organisation, and an agreement to have a new approach to working together with Welsh Government on housing development and regeneration. So those were the very broad heads of terms which were agreed last March. And as I said earlier, there are some key targets, the main one being around 25,000 new jobs, which is a very significant thing for our City Deal region. So the heads of terms were very specific in saying the establishment of a capital region cabinet will be the first step in the development of greater city region governance across the Cardiff capital region. That was what was envisaged in the heads of terms. That is what you're being asked to agree to today. Now, since the 15th of March of last year, we've been working very hard. There have been weekly meetings which chief execs and leaders have been attending, and an awful lot of governance arrangements have been worked through, put in place. You can imagine that working with 10 organisations plus 2 governments is not easy in terms of agreeing and nailing down some governance, but what you've got here is the result of all of that work. And this is where we've got to today. So this is a very key stage in agreeing those governance arrangements and moving forward. Now, I mentioned that there were 2 elements to the scheme, and you can see in 4.4.1 how that is broken down. The Metro scheme is mainly Welsh Government money, £503 million of Welsh Government money. £106 million worth of European money, which is already committed and guaranteed regardless of Brexit, and £125 million from UK Government. So that's the Metro element. That will be the responsibility of Welsh Government, not the Joint Cabinet. The other element is a combination of the £120 million from the 10 authorities and £375 million from UK Government. So that's how that is broken down, and that is the bit that the Joint Cabinet will have responsibility for. So I mentioned the Growth Commission, and there's more detail about their findings at 4.6 in the report. I'm not going to go through it all, but there are some very important headlines there. The Growth Commission was populated by experts in their field who've had a lot of dealings with other city deals across other countries across the world. And their view was that the Cardiff capital region has the potential to develop into a prosperous capital city region for Wales with multiple benefits for the Welsh economy and all the people of Wales. And when I heard the original presentation from the Growth Commission, the thing that struck me particularly personally was that they were saying that you have to raise people out of poverty at the bottom level if you want to create prosperity across the top. So you cannot just invest in business and expect people to, the city region to become more prosperous. Everybody must benefit across all stratas of society. So the Growth Commission said we need to look at improving interconnectivity, which of course the Metro will be key to, invest in education, skills and employability, and enhance the business climate for emerging sectors, enterprises and innovation. And the Commission also highlighted the fact that the City Deal was not just about the investment, because if you think about the investment, although £1.2 billion sounds like an awful lot of money, over 20 years it really isn't. And what they were saying was, the Growth Commission was saying, was that although it's a relatively small investment fund, it was about how Welsh Government, UK Government and the councils could work together in a different way, and that was the magic that would create prosperity in a way that we haven't seen before. So they said, rather than seeing the City Deal as a broad programme of investment, we suggest that it may be better to regard it as the foundation to increase joint working and co-investment, and resources should focus on key themes intended to signal a direction of travel and lever in wider investments. So the Growth Commission report, members, if you haven't read it, I think is well worth reading. It's not a heavy read. It's available widely on the internet, and you've got a link to it, and it really is a very interesting document. So what are the next steps? Well, the next steps, as I said, is to formally establish the regional cabinet, agree the terms and conditions of the investment fund, and agree how we are going to take forward the business plan. And the key components of that will be the joint cabinet, which has been sitting in shadow form, coming out of shadow. That's significant. It means it then becomes a public cabinet in the way that ours is. It's subject to public scrutiny. It's subject to freedom of information requests and all the things that come with being a public part of an organisation. There will need to be formal approval of the assurance framework and formal approval of the implementation plan. So I talked about the JWA, which is detailed in more drills down at 5.2. Linda is the expert on the JWA, but I know quite a lot about it, having been in so many meetings connected with it. Basically, it's the fundamental legal document that establishes the regional cabinet as a joint committee. And there are three areas of delegation within the JWA. So there are things that can be delegated to the programme director, who is a senior officer appointed by the joint cabinet as overseer of the management of the city deal. There are matters that will be delegated to the joint committee, which is the majority of the decisions to be taken, and there are matters that will be reserved to the councils, which we've already discussed. Approval of the JWA business plan, which I've mentioned before, means that there is a high-level programme of indicative investment. Now, that's the first of those reserved matters that I've talked about. So this is what needs to come back to you as a council. The second part of those reserved matters is the affordability envelope. That's the element that I talked about where it's the entire cost, including interest, not just the capital investment. And the third part is the council's contribution above the 100, if there's any intention to go above that 120 million. So the first one of those three reserved matters will come back to you, because we cannot proceed to spend more than 50 million without agreeing that high-level business plan. The other two may never come back to you. It will depend whether there is an intention at some stage to go over the agreed financial limits. And I've mentioned that the JWA does allow the regional cabinet to spend up to 50 million before the business plan has been agreed. I have to say that the basis upon this would be that that money would be UK government money that's contributed into that 495 million, and it's important to point out that there is a risk that should not all 10 councils subsequently approve the business plan, which is unlikely but possible, if that 50 million had already been committed, there would be an obligation on councils to pay it back, because they would have to cover the costs from their existing budgets, and because people are locked in, we have to highlight that as a risk. Now, that's the JWA, and as I say, it's attached to the report. It's very detailed, and we can answer any questions you have on the detail of that. The assurance framework is set out in Schedule 8 to the JWA, which is with your papers, and it's really the way that we go about assessing investments and making sure that they are sound investments, that they are strategic investments, and that they are likely to contribute to raising GVA. So that's a very important document. That's attached to your papers, and we can answer any questions on that. And if you look at that plan, you will see that as part of the assurance, there are arrangements for scrutiny by joint scrutiny from the 10 councils. And the third document that you need to approve is set out at Schedule 9 to the JWA, and that is the implementation plan, which, as I've said, sets out the themes, the key milestones and the activities which will need to be gone through. So over the course of the next few weeks, all councils will be considering a report in the way that you are now. And once all 10 constituent councils agree, if all 10 councils agree, which we assume that they will, then the assurance framework and the implementation plan will need to be submitted to Welsh Government and UK governments by the end of February 2017 and finalised by the 31st of March 2017. We need to do that. We have to meet those deadlines in order to release this financial year's funding contribution from UK government. All the discussions that the leader and I have been involved in and colleagues have been involved in suggest that leaders of the 10 councils are supportive of the city deal and are keen to sign up to the JWA. The councils that have gone through so far as I'm aware, have all been unanimous in their support of the city deal. Nevertheless, this is a decision that has to be taken by each council, and we do not know whether this council or any council that hasn't yet made a decision may decide that they can't agree to all the terms and conditions and the recommendations. That's a possibility. And it may be possible that one of the councils will decide not to go ahead with the city deal. Unlikely, but possible. So we need to make provision for that. So in terms of the recommendations, you will see at 5.5, should there be a request to change terms and conditions by one or more councils, it's proposed that you agree that I, in consultation with the leader, the monitoring officer and the Section 151 officer, be granted delegated authority to make such amendments as are necessary. I mean, one would anticipate that they would be small amendments. If they were very large amendments, that would be a matter for discussion before that delegated authority was exercised. There's also, as I said, a possibility that one of the councils will decide not to go ahead with the city deal. If that's the case, it is proposed at 5.6 that the leader, in consultation with myself, the monitoring officer and the Section 151 officer, be granted delegated authority to decide whether the council should continue to explore the continued opportunity to participate in the city deal. Because if one council were not to agree, then clearly the whole financial calculation would change, and therefore that would be a matter that one would need to consider very carefully. Now, the financial considerations are set out at Part 6. I will go through some of the aspects of that, but as I say, if you have any detailed questions, we will endeavour to answer those. I've gone through the split of the fund. You will see at 6.2 that 375 million of the funding is provided by the UK government to the regional cabinet, funded on a staged basis over 20 years. So it will be £10 million a year over the first 5 years, £21 million a year over the following 5 years, and £22 million a year over the remaining 10 years. So it's likely that investments will be made early in the life of the fund if we're going to provide the leap in GVA that we want. And the 10 constituent councils will have to borrow funding to cover the temporary shortfall until the UK government funding becomes available. And this is what we refer to as carry costs in the report. So there's the money that we have, the interest that we have to pay on the money we ourselves borrow to put in our 120 million. There's also the carry costs if we want to bring forward the UK government funding. The Section 151 officers have worked incredibly hard on modelling a number of potential scenarios, looked at variables such as the profile of spend, the interest rates for borrowing, the split of capital and revenue, and the treatment of inflation. All of these things can change the overall costs. And the result of this detailed work is a prudent funding model, which estimates that the total cost of the deal at the regional level is projected to be 210.8 million, of which 166.8 million is the estimated cost of the local authorities' capital contribution, and 44 million is the estimated cost of the carry costs. Sorry if that's complicated. We've made it as straightforward as we can, but it is incredibly complex finance, as you can appreciate. Our share of that is 6.1%, and is projected to be in the order of £12.9 million over a 25-year period. The annual revenue budget requirement to fund this contribution is profiled over the life of the deal. The total cost will be smaller in the earlier years of the deal, and years 1 to 5, it's estimated to be around 0.6 million. So not a huge amount in terms of this authority's budget. We are modelling that it will peak in year 11 at 0.8 million for that year. And the Council will allocate a sum from reserves for 2017-18 to cover the very small estimated first-year contribution, and will seek to set aside funding to support future years as part of our medium-term financial planning arrangements. And we will establish a specific reserve so that fluctuations in annual contributions can be smoothed over, because we can anticipate there will be some fluctuations. As part of the terms of the City deal, the Regional Cabinet will be required to evaluate the impact of the £495 million investment fund in order to unlock UK government funding going into the future. So every 5 years there will be a gateway assessment which will consist of an independent review to evaluate the economic benefits and the economic impact of the investments, i.e. have we been raising GVA as intended. This gateway review will look at whether projects have been delivered on time and on budget, and the gateway reviews are likely to be structured to be at years 5, 10 and 15, and therefore any funding from year 6 onwards will be subject to agreed performance objectives being achieved. So it is the responsibility of the 10 constituent councils to manage the financial impact of the gateway reviews within their budget, and that has to be a risk. Whether it's a great risk or a small risk will become more apparent as we move forward with the projects. But the assurance framework is there to mitigate this risk. So the assurance framework is there to stop projects going forward unless they have strategic impact and they are likely to raise GVA. And if we do that job properly through the assurance framework, there will be a margin of safety that any project that gets through is likely to also get through the gateway review. Now, there's one issue around finance that I have to highlight. It's what's called by lawyers a condition subsequent. And we've had all sorts of debates amongst the leaders about reserve matters and conditions subsequent. But this is set out at 6.7 of the report, and that's the fact that over the past few months, officers have engaged with Welsh Government on a number of City deal issues, and one issue that remains outstanding is the terms and conditions that will accompany the UK Government funding. We've yet to receive a draft copy of the terms and conditions, and therefore the JWA contains a condition that its continuation is subject to these terms and conditions being acceptable to the Regional Cabinet. So should, I think again this is unlikely, but should the terms and conditions come through and the Regional Cabinet say we cannot accept these terms and conditions, they are just not acceptable to us, then the JWA would fall at that point and we would have to go back to the drawing board. Again, unlikely to happen, but important that you take the decision in the knowledge of that information. If you look at the final financial issue, is at 6.9. The 10 constituent councils established a memorandum of understanding during 2015 to enable them to progress work with the City deal. And the MOU set out a partnership revenue contribution budget required to fund any preparatory work in an annual sum of £500,000. It's proposed that this arrangement continues into 2017-18, but that the sum is increased to £1 million, of which Torvine's share would be £61,000. The Council would, if approved, finance this sum for reserves from 2017-18. Item 7 of the report deals with consultation. There's been a huge amount of consultation with businesses, higher and further education and all local authority members during the process of preparation. You will know, members, that you had a presentation from the Programme Director on the 13th of December in full council, and there was an opportunity there to ask questions. And we also know that the Growth and Competitiveness Commission did a very large amount of consultation during their work. Clearly, under the new legislation, we need to do a wellbeing assessment, and that's been completed, and that is attached to the report. It's been completed once on behalf of all the local authorities. But as individual projects come forward, there will need to be individual wellbeing assessments on each project. So in conclusion, members, the economy of South Wales has consistently underperformed the majority of other regions of the UK. And there are high levels of poverty and deprivation in our city region area. And if that's going to change, we have to act now, and we have to act together. We have to accelerate the economic growth of the city region. And you will see in item 9 of the report there is a quote from the Growth Commission which says, "The international evidence shows us that those city regions that adopt strategies that combine together economic development with spatial development, infrastructure development, improved sustainability and more effective human services can find a path to increased prosperity and inclusion." So there is evidence from elsewhere that this can be done in areas like ours, and it can make a real difference to people's lives. So the recommendations, members, I will take you through briefly. Recommendation 10.1 is to approve the JWA. Recommendation 10.2 is to approve the financial contributions from each constituent councils towards the £120 million total. 10.3 is to approve the carry forward of any remaining revenue funds from 16-17 into 17-18 in order to support the structure for the regional cabinet. 10.4 is to approve the collective revenue contributions of up to £1 million to the 17-18 budget in order to support the structure for the regional cabinet. 10.5 is to approve that the City of Cardiff Council acts as the accountable body. In other words, they do the administrative work on behalf of the regional cabinet and manage the finances. 10.6 is to approve the assurance framework. 10.7 to approve the implementation plan. 10.8, as I mentioned, to give delegated authority to me in consultation with the leader, monitoring officer in section 151 to agree any amendments that happen before the 1st of March. 10.9 to give delegated authority to the leader in consultation with myself, the monitoring officer and the section 151 officer, to consider what the way forward should be should one council not agree to the city deal. 10.10 to approve the leader of the council or his nominated deputy to be granted delegated authority to sign the JWA on behalf of the council. And 10.11 to approve the monitoring officer in consultation with the members' Constitution Working Party to be granted delegated authority to make any necessary changes to the Constitution. So apologies for the length of that report, members, but in a way not apologies. It's one of the most important decisions that you will take as members, and I think it's very important that you fully understand what's involved. So we are all here to answer your questions. I'm sure the leader would probably like to say something first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank the Chief Executive for her report, and before other members have a chance to maybe ask some questions or make a contribution, I'd like to commend the recommendations. I'd also like to thank Sheila Davis for coming to brief councillors last month at our meeting. In doing that, I'd like to commend the way that the leaders and chief execs of all 10 councils, including Bob when he was the leader of our council, have taken this issue forwards, setting aside political differences and individual agendas to work in line with the evidence to get the best deal for the region as a whole. I believe the chief exec's gone through the detail in, very thoroughly there, but I believe the vision and the principles of this are worth noting too. This is a unique opportunity for us to work together along with the Welsh Government and the UK Government, to invest £1.2 billion in the region and hopefully lever in much more than that again. If we follow other councils and approve this report today, it will be an important milestone and a major step to realising significant economic investment for the region. This investment will have a long-term impact on the financial health of the whole region and in turn improve the lives and opportunities for our residents, and that has to be key in this. The collective ambition shown by the 10 local authorities to improve the transport and digital network, support innovation, enterprise and business growth and skills will make South East Wales an attractive place to live and do business. So if you approve this report today, Torfaen will have a place at the table, working with others to fight our corner. That process will be open and accountable. I'll be there around the table fighting our corner, and in addition, I make a pledge to report back regularly to Council in that job. So before other members get a chance to ask questions, I just wanted to commend the report to Council.
Thank you. Members, it's now your opportunity to ask questions. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I understand that I went to a meeting of the Transport Shadow board yesterday, so I think it's my second. And I think it's all starting to unfold now. It's a very, very complex matter, and I acknowledge that there are many members who probably don't understand what it's all about. But I must stress there is a misconception that the Cardiff City deal, etc., is rail-focused. Well, it isn't as far from that, although rail is a very important integral part of it. And we're talking about the bus routes, etc., And I think it's acknowledged also that every area within the region is regional unique. I mean, what suits us here in Dorvey may not suit Newport, Cardiff, or whatever. But that's acknowledged within the Cabinet, I think. And I understand when this March the 1st signing is done on the JWA, that, and I'm sure the Chief Executive will correct me if I'm wrong, it releases £10 million, I understand, that the Welsh Government has sat on at this moment in time to start the process going. Is that right? That's what I was told. But it is important to note that one size doesn't fit all. There are tens of thousands of people moving around the region to get employment these days. I mean, that's the way of the world, that's the global economy, and that's something that has to be addressed, I think. But I don't think that we cannot not be party to this. As I said, Monmouth was so excited about it, they stood up and gave themselves a standing ovation. Because they played. But I think we're in the last quarter now to make a decision. There are a number of other councils making a decision today, and we are part of that. So I would totally and utterly support this.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Kemp is next, and then...
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, the project will come to fruition over a 20-year period. Now, in that time, when it comes to the authority boundaries, if like each of the 10 authorities might have the option to voluntarily merge with one another, if you like, from a Torfaen stance, if like what is likely to happen if that does occur over the next 20 years, and what will the impact be on Torfaen?
Yes, Councillor Burnett next. Sorry, did you want to answer that? Yes, please.
I didn't anticipate that question. That's a good one. If were two councils to merge, they would become one legal entity. So in effect, let's say two councils merged within the city deal, you would have 9 partners instead of 10 partners. And because it would become one legal entity, you would have one leader, one chief executive, one set of governance. So effectively, it would be the same as 10 authorities, but you would have 9. That's how it would work.
If I could come back on that, if you like, in regarding the detailed report under the 5.5 and 5.6 under the delegated powers, if that did happen in regarding the merger, I'm anticipating that only the select few wouldn't make the decision to actually go ahead, if like in that case, and it would come back to council for further discussion.
I think it wouldn't be 5.5 and 5.6 because those are very short term. That's just should something go awry between now and the 1st of March and one of the councils drops out or one of the councils won't agree to the same recommendations as the others, then there's a very short-term power for the leader or myself, depending on what's involved, to actually make amendments without needing to come back to council necessarily. So that's not going to be affected by any mergers. I take your other point that over the 20 years there might be a merger, the governance, there might be 2 or 3 mergers, we don't know. But if there were 2 councils merging together, then there would only be one leader and one chief executive, so the delegation would just go to those people rather than there being 2 sets of people. That's how it would work. Yeah?
Sorry if it helps, Councillor Kemp. I mean, the JWA, it binds successor authorities, so it would continue with any change in the authority setup and would be implemented along those lines, if that helps.
Councillor Wellington? Oh, did you want to come in there, leader?
I just want to put on that point, because Because the contributions, as I understand it, for authorities are worked out through population, also if there were two merged authorities, it would largely be a governance question rather than a financial one, because there too, obviously, if two authorities merged, their population would merge as well, so there wouldn't be a knock-on impact on us in terms of the financial contribution. It would just be a governance question.
Councillor Wellington.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. First of all, I want to congratulate the Chief Executive for the overview that she gave. It's very, very good, excellent, and didn't leave anything out. So congratulations on that. This is the biggest exercise that have ever been undertaken in Wales, actually. This is one of 4. We've got the Swansea City Bay deal, which is a number of authorities, the Ambition Board in the north, something in Mid Wales, but the Cardiff City deal has got the 10 industrial authorities in South Wales, over 50% of the population. Nothing like this have ever been tried, actually, never mind about succeeding. I want to compliment both those officers in all the authorities and the other 9 leaders for all the work that they've put in. And what this proves is that local government, you know, in spite of what the Assembly says, or indeed the national government, don't work, they have proven on pulling together this exercise that they can work, and that we've got a lot of talented people in local government who, when they set a task, can come up with the goods. So congratulations to everybody who've had a contribution into this. It's very exciting, long overdue, and congratulations to all the work that's been done by officers and the other leaders. They really pulled together. I think everybody is surprised that they've got this far without a bust-up, but they managed to maintain unity on it, and that's a good thing. So all is well, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Burnett now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Chief Executive, for that report. The decision, whatever is made today, is not for today. It's for the future of Torfaen and the councils throughout Wales. It's in 20 years' time. I'm just looking around how many of us will be here in 20 years' time. Not many, by the seams of it, as we all go on in years. John did say something just now about transport. You've been involved with that. And as we know, all councils in Wales have had cut subsidies on local transport in my ward, as you know. I just hope to see in the future that will improve, again, for the footfall and for the health and well-being of everybody. So the next 20 years is the future, not for us, but for our families and our children and grandchildren. So I will be voting for this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. I've got Councillor Ashley, followed by Councillor Rees. Is there anyone else at this stage who wants to speak? Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Ashley.
Thank you for your presentation, Chief Executive. And I get this. I actually sat down and read it. It's quite a lot of stuff there. And obviously, what I was reflecting on with respect to the position I got at the moment was the scrutiny of this. And there's a lot of stuff in there, and everybody's agreed to do it. And the bit I was looking at was the Regional Assurance Committee. You've agreed to do the thing. How are you going to scrutinise it is an important question. Who's going to scrutinise it is also, if you agreed to do it, and how are you going to agree to scrutinise it? And that's fundamentally my very simple question there, because the agreement to do it is one thing, who scrutinises it and how they scrutinise it. And there's some very interesting questions in there. Could you elucidate on any of that? Has that been thought about yet?
Thank you. There is provision, as you say, Councillor, just for anyone who might not have read it as thoroughly as you have. In the assurance framework, which I think if you look at page 123 of our agenda, you will see that 2.2.2 of the assurance framework is the setting up of a regional assurance committee, which is made up of 10 scrutiny chairs, one from each of the local authorities. So the mechanism is there, and 2.2.2 sets out clearly what the role of that committee will be, which is to scrutinise financial affairs, receive accounts, review and assess the Cabinet's risk management, internal control and corporate governance, review and assess the economy, efficiency and effectiveness for which resources have been used in relation to the wider investment fund, and make reports and recommendations to the Regional Cabinet. That is the provision to do that. Your question is, has it been done yet and sorted out? No, it hasn't. But it will be. It must be, because it's in this agreement, which you're signing up to today.
Thank you. So, Councillor Rees next, please.
I've got a few questions, so I hope members will bear with me. This is an important issue, so I think we need to take as much time as we need to get as much information as we can. I've tried to push the agenda a little bit further forward. So, Nigel, my questions all relate to the Regional Cabinet side of the deal. So I'm sort of pushing you for detail on it, really. In terms of British Government funding, we're still waiting for official final terms, but is it likely that the British Government will provide their funding through debt or grant? And if it's going to be through debt, is there any possibility that the Regional Cabinet will be responsible for interest payments on the debt? That's number one.
The UK Government funding, as far as I am aware, will come as grant. But we will have to cover the cost of interest before that money is received from the UK Government. We've made assumptions around when the spending profile is going to come. That funding will not follow that spending profile. The 375 million will come in chunks, as the Chief Executive has said, and that will be out of sync with the spending profile. So therefore we will have to borrow and we will carry the interest on that, and that's what's in the calculations.
Okay, what happens if the Council is responsible for cost overruns and cannot raise additional funds in compliance with Treasury prudential borrowing rules?
I mean, the assurance framework covers how projects would come to fruition, and the management of those projects would be within that. At the moment, we haven't decided. Will one authority lead on all the projects? Will 10 authorities lead on projects? And that'll all have to be worked through. We've got the affordability envelope. So if for cost overruns somehow we're going to breach that affordability envelope, that has to come back to councils anyway. I mean, no Section 151 officer would anticipate that they can't, look to be managing this on a regional basis and stay within their limits and manage it appropriately.
I think the next few are probably for the leader. Some areas are already on their 5th city deal. Is this deal the first of many to come, or is it a one-off?
I believe this city deal will stick. I think I've seen, in my short time as leader, that the authorities coming together and resolving the hurdles that have come their way already, and I'm confident that it will stick and that we can work together, ironing out our differences. I'm glad that so far there's been good cross-party support. Councillors of all parties and none have united behind this, and I believe that reflects the spirit that's been approached within the joint cabinet, albeit in shadow form so far. It's people putting aside their own sort of personal, parochial or political points of view and working to get a deal that makes a difference for the people we represent.
Just to follow up then, so once you've got the compound semiconductor matters all clear, is there anything else that you'll be looking to do as the leader of Torfaen on the Regional Cabinet?
There's a dual sort of purpose to that, I think. Whilst, of course, I'll be looking to fight the corner of Torfaen for as long as I'm leader and as long as I'm the person round the table there, and you can have my assurance on that, and you'll have my assurance that I'll report back to you and show you how I'm delivering for Torfaen as part of this deal. There's also the regional aspect of it. I think the semiconductors, obviously with Monmouth, we're taking a lead on the high-tech side of things. And I think there's that regional view as well. I think you have to view this as bringing the region as a whole up, and then our constituents, parts of that region, will benefit from that as well. So, those will be my two tasks on the city deal board as it stands. One, to make sure Torvine gets the best possible deal from this, but also to play that more regional role beyond just Torvine in making sure that it works for the region as a whole.
I'm glad you emphasised the regional element of it. So, could I offer a third matter you could possibly look into is ensuring that the regional cabinet uses the principles of Welsh public procurement policy, because it's not mentioned at all in the report.
Of course, as we get to the individual projects, then I think those sort of issues will start to come out more and more as we look to what the projects are and how we implement them, how we make sure that as much as possible of the spend has a benefit for businesses in the region, in this part of Wales.
Looking forward then for the 5-year sort of gate review, can you put some detail on who is going to be responsible for the appointments to the National Evaluation Panel as part of the 5-year gateway review? Is it going to be the Regional Cabinet or is it going to be Welsh Government? Because it's going to be essential to know who's going to be making the review, because further money is dependent on that outcome being positive.
I don't think the details of the gateway reviews and what's going to happen have been finally ironed out by the UK government themselves in terms of all the city regions. The last comment I can recall on it was that the Cardiff City region will have a full seat at the table in sort of helping to make sure that, and designing those gateway reviews.
Just to be clear then, so is it the British government's deciding the terms of reference for the gateway review, or will it be the Regional Cabinet or Welsh Government?
The terms of the gateway reviews are, it's the UK government's terms of the gateway review.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just looking at page 91 and the decision on agreeing any Welsh Government funding, agreeing the form of the gateway reviews is proposed to be a joint committee matter. It's under the delegations there. Does that answer your question, Councillor Rees? Sorry.
So the joint committee, that will be the Regional Cabinet? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
So the Regional Cabinet will be responsible for the appointees to the gateway review, yeah? For the panel.
The wording is agreeing the form of the gateway reviews.
A couple more. It's about employment rates. In 3.6, appraisal criteria, of course, employment rates are vital as metrics to measure success of the city deal. It talks about measuring them by constituency, and my worry is, in all likelihood, maybe a reform of constituency boundaries, and Torvine might be, there might be some more wards added to the Torvine constituency, and those wards, in my view, would probably be the better off ones in terms of GVA, and also in terms of employment rates. Is there a danger places that actually need employment investment and jobs aren't going to get that attention because, as a constituency, we're going to be looking better than we have previously? So what are you going to do about that?
I think you make a very valid point in that any increase in GVA needs to be looked at in the context in which it sits. Obviously, that would be a way, if GVA in Torvine increases because of the wards, we can try and drill down into that. Similarly, I think it's key to point out there are several drivers that are affecting GVA in the region at the moment, not in a positive direction in terms of benefit reform and some of the other sort of macroeconomic things going on at the moment. So the point you make is valid, that we'll need to measure and evaluate our success within context, and that is a particular context that is appropriate.
Just finally then, in terms of employment and the importance of having core businesses and core government offices, government spending in Torvine, what actions have been taken to try and secure the Regional Committee's Secretariat to be located in Torvine?
That's the kind of level of detail we can move on to if all 10 authorities pull through, and we can try and have that debate. I think it's fair to say that we're aware of the need to make sure that the benefit of the city deal is spread throughout the region and doesn't just get dragged sort of southwards as other initiatives have before, because there's a need for all parts of the region to benefit. So that's discussions that can take place when we move out of shadow and start moving on the projects.
I just want to conclude by saying that I support this report and I support the recommendations. There are a few holes in this, but I think we've got to go with what we got for the benefit of Torway.
Thank you. That's been a very interesting debate so far. Does anyone else wish to say anything before we go to the vote? No? In that case, members, you are aware of the recommendations on page 52. May I have a show of hands, please? And that is agreed unanimously, with the benefit of 2 hands in one instance. So after what was quite a historical debate, I feel, and I'm sure you all agree, we move to agenda item 55, which is on page 177, and that's the Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Nigel Aurelius, Assistant Chief Executive Officer, could you present your report for us, please?
Thank you. I'll be very quick. This is an administrative report. We bring it forward every year. It's basically reapproving the council tax reduction scheme and allowing for the uprating of certain allowances within there that have been approved by the Welsh Government. Since council tax benefit was replaced by council tax reduction scheme, you have to approve this every year before the 31st of or by the 31st of January. So it's purely an administrative report.
Members, any questions or comments before we go to the vote? Right. The report's been moved. May I have a show of hands, please? And again, that is unanimous. Thank you. No, it isn't. There's one do you vote against or do you abstain? Abstain. One abstention. Thank you. So the recommendations are agreed with that one abstention. Moving on to page 201, item 12, the introduction of the living wage. Graham Russell, Head of Human Resources and Pensions. Could you present your report for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a relatively short report, and what it does is to just inform Council of the detailed arrangements around the introduction of the living wage. Members may recall that this was one element of the policy choice that was agreed in setting the budget for 2016-17. It was also referred to as part of the annual pay policy statement to March Council last year, in which there was a request that once the details were available, a report was brought back. So this report is just satisfying that requirement. The living wage is not to be confused with the mandatory minimum wage. This is a level of pay for individual workers sufficient, or it's calculated as being sufficient to enable employees and their families to work and live free from poverty. So the living wage is a voluntary choice, and it is pitched at a level higher than the statutory minimum wage. So what the report tries to do is to just set out a little bit more about the background and set out some of the operational aspects. And what is involved here is a review of the current levels of hourly pay for the existing workforce of the Council, and where that has fallen below the living wage, which is currently £8.25, then levels of pay have been adjusted and increased to ensure that members of the workforce receive at least the living wage. These arrangements have been put into place from the 1st of January, but they have been backdated as part of discussions and negotiation with the trade unions to the 1st of July. And so the arrears element of it has been paid as a single lump sum to individual members of staff who are receiving this payment. It affects only those at the very lowest levels of pay within the council. And what it does, the report sets out how it affects those on grades 1, 2, 3 and 4. And this is part of paragraph 5 of the report. So that you will see that there is a table that shows the current spinal column points from point 6 through to 14 and shows current salaries and the amount of additional salary with the new hourly rate that employees would get. So these proposals affect our grades 1, 2 and 3. They just touch into grade 4, and as the living wage rolls out over the course of subsequent years, it will edge up slightly higher into the rest of grade 4. But these are people within the workforce who are undertaking roles such as cleaning, catering staff, teaching assistants. So they are those people very much providing day-to-day support and services to the community. So the details are set out there in the report. Every year the living wage is recalculated, and it's been recalculated with effect from, well, it was calculated in November just gone, and that would increase the living wage from £8.25 an hour up to £8.45 an hour. What was provided within the estimates for the current year was at the level of £8.25. So there are some proposals within the revenue budget which you will consider further over the course of the next month that would provide sufficient provision to enable the living wage to increase slightly further. The process around this has been discussed over a period of time with the trade unions. It affects, as the report says, about 574 members of staff. But of course, as those people edge up slightly, what it does is impact on those just above them. So it's right to maintain those differences where people are doing important but slightly different levels of work. And so in order to maintain those differentials, there are another 300 or so staff who received a marginal increase in their pay as well. So all told, approaching 900 members of staff, all at the bottom grade ranges, have received increases in pay to ensure that as a council you are rewarding those staff for the work they're doing for the community at those lower levels. This will need to be reflected in the pay policy report that will need to come through. And I think it is true to say that because of the nature of the work that people do, most of the people who will benefit from these increases are people who live and contribute to the community of Torvine itself. So a very, very large majority of the staff who have received these payments live within Torvine directly. So the report is for information, and it just sets out the details to enable you to understand which members of staff it has affected and how it operates, and to also recognise the fact that in due course what we'll need to do each year is to look at the annual pay award, but then also layer onto that an assessment of how the living wage will affect those people at the lower ends of the grades, so that we can ensure that we are maintaining the level of pay that members wish, and also maintaining differentials at the lower end, which doesn't compromise the grading structure in any way. So I think, Madam Mayor, those are the only comments I'd wish to make on the report.
Thank you, Graham. Leader, I believe you wish to pass comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Graham for presenting his report, and to him and his officers for the work they've done on this over the past year. I say that not just as a matter of course, because we haven't done this in the easiest way for his officers, and I recognise that. There's a lot of work that's gone into working this out, but I think it's the right way to implement the living wage, is to do it via altering our pay spine, as opposed to just paying it as a sort of an ad hoc extra payment. But I recognise that's involved extra work for Graham and his officers, so I thank them for that. This report, for me, cuts to the heart of what we should strive to be as a council, an organisation that values people and works with them to improve services. Local services are the sum total of the people who work in them, the people who ensure our children have a safe and fulfilling time in school, the people who take care of the vulnerable, the people who provide vital services in our communities, and the people who keep our area clean and green. These are the people who benefit from this decision in Council today. These are not faceless bureaucrats talked about in some quarters by people who wish to denigrate public services and those who work in them. They work hard for modest reward to provide services, and our communities would be lost without them. I have huge admiration for them all. While our focus should always be on improving services, I don't think people like that get thanked enough. So this is the right thing to do, not only because it will give 900 of our lowest paid staff a fairer deal, but also because it will help to improve local services, because fairly treated staff will stay longer and produce better results in the long term. This report is also a reflection of our approach to pay in this council, of restraint at the top and fairness for others. We've reduced our senior management bill by around a quarter, and members, including myself as leader, have refused pay increases over the past 5 years in recognition of the difficult financial situation facing councils. This is also good news for the local economy, as the vast majority of our staff, as Graham said, both live and work locally, so more money in their pockets will be good for local businesses. Can I lastly pay tribute to Unison and the GMB for their lobbying on this issue on behalf of staff? They've been patient as we've sought to introduce this measure in a fair and sustainable way. They've shown the benefit of the Council and trade unions working in partnership rather than seeing each other as the enemy. I value them as critical friends and as tireless campaigners for the people they represent, and I'll therefore urge Council to back this report.
Thank you, Leader. Members, does anyone wish to ask any questions or comments? Councillor Wellington.
I don't ask a question, but I want to congratulate the officers for taking this up as an issue, and I particularly want to congratulate the leader for championing this. And as a start in his new role, I think this is excellent. Fits in with his philosophy in terms of how our council should be run, and how we should be a caring council, and how we should be looking after our staff in whatever way we can. And so I would second the motion and thank our staff, and in particular thank Anthony Hunt for the way he championed this.
Are there any further comments or questions? No, in that case, members, the recommendations are to note the information and note that the report fulfills the requirement as laid out on page 206. Could I have a show of hands, please? There's 4. And that one is unanimous. Thank you. The recommendation to note is agreed. So we move now to page 207, agenda item 13, nominations to outside bodies. Lynn Williams, Head of Business Support and Intelligence. Would you like to take on this?
Thank you. This report is to inform Council of the changes agreed by the Chief Executive and the Leader under delegated powers within the Constitution to the members nominated to serve on outside bodies. The changes are outlined in Appendix 1 to the report, which is on page 209 of the agenda. The one change that was to be advised at the meeting is the Primary and Secondary Education Joint Committee, and I can now say that would be Councillor Glyn Caron. Members are invited to note the report.
Members, do you have any comments? Are you happy to note the report? Could you please show? Thank you. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members will recall at the last council meeting this was raised because following the election of Councillor Hunt as the leader, there is a vacancy now on the Members' Constitution Working Party, and I would ask if there's a nomination to come forward, please.
Can I nominate the Mayor, Councillor Veronica Crook?
Thank you. And
So
is
that
that
come on, is it?
seconded? And can I ask, Madam Mayor, perhaps if I can ask for a show of hands? Could I ask for a show of hands, please, members? There we are. Thank you very much, members. That's unanimous.
So we move now to the adoption of the monitoring officer protocol, which is on page 213.
Well, members, it's probably quite timely that, as my parting shot to you, I suggest that you might consider adopting a protocol. As we've sort of touched on before, although the functions of the monitoring officer are set out partly in the Constitution, as you will see the report refers to, and also in legislation, it doesn't really help in explaining a little bit more detail how those duties are actually carried out. And I have to pay tribute to my fellow monitoring officers who just so happened have been working on a monitoring officer protocol which sets those out more generally and is before you for adoption. And the idea is it is helpful to members and to officers, as well as the monitoring officer, to understand how those functions are then set out. You'll see that in the protocol it refers to the reportable incident, and this is very much what monitoring officers call their nuclear option. If they feel their advice is not being heeded, that they personally can bring a report to council to say something the council is proposing to act unlawfully and asking you to do something about it. Very rare occurrence, and I'm happy to say I've never come anywhere near it in Torvine. But it does set that out. It also sets out the various elements of the job role, some of which members will be more than aware of about giving advice, including advice on the code of conduct to community councillors, etc. It then goes on to talk about the resources that the monitoring officer might need to do that, access to meetings, asking for explanations, etc. It also says that a monitoring officer to be effective needs to have early indications of what may be happening so that the guidance can start at an early point and steer away from potentially activity which wouldn't normally be allowed, etc. Also, a lot about the local codes, how the monitoring officer advises members, etc. I think it's important because it's that expectation of behaviour towards the monitoring officer that I think and I hope all members would adhere to, and I hope it will be helpful going forward for everybody to say, if the question says, well, where does it say you should or could do that? Hopefully that will be an added tool for you as well as the legislation, etc. It has been through the Ethics and Standards Committee, and you'll see if I can go to 5.2, they have given some indications. They're underlined in the protocol, so you can see where they feel they've added a few suggested wording to give greater clarity. I did omit to include the last amendment right at the end where it says if there's a conflict that a monitoring officer from a neighbouring authority can be asked to act. They've also suggested also possibly an independent person could be asked to act in those circumstances. So I support the suggestions from the Ethics and Standards Committee, and I would suggest to members that it's a helpful addition if you would adopt it, and then it would be inserted as it is in the Constitution for easy reference in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, members. The recommendation is on the bottom of 215, but I do notice that Councillor Morby is looking at me with his hand raised.
Yep. Thanks for the report, and yeah, I've got no problem with it, but a question arises as to whether or not this protocol would include the monitoring officer being empowered to deal with decisions which did not, in the opinion of a member, for example, or a member of the public, meet the equality impact assessment criteria adopted by the Council.
I think that's part of the General Monitoring Officer duty when they look through the reports, etc., and engage with the Equalities Officer, etc. So I hope it would come within that umbrella of the Monitoring Officer role, as there will be many of those and wouldn't necessarily be specifically referred to in the protocol. But
that's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to ask a question or comment? No. I'm sorry. We're moving to page 223 for those of you who didn't hear me because I hadn't put the speaker on. So, Linda, could you please present this again? Or it's Alison. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a very short report. As we know, Linda is due to retire on the 27th of February of this year. We know that we're still waiting for announcements on local government reform. In fact, we believe that something may be coming from Mark Drakeford today. So it's probably a time for a little bit of pause and reflection before we decide on what the full senior management structure of the council will be going forward in the longer term. So I'm proposing that whilst we consider the outcomes of that announcement on local government reform, that we have an interim situation and appoint Delith Harris, who's the Deputy Monitoring Officer, for an initial period of 6 months as the Monitoring Officer for the Council. Because it's a statutory role, it has to be a Council appointment, so I'd recommend Delith to you for an interim period of 6 months.
Thank you. Do members have any questions or comments, please? Right. Could someone then please move? Thank you. And a seconder? Right. May I see your hands? If you're all agreed. Yes, everyone is agreed. Thank you. The recommendations are agreed. There are now members' questions, which there are two, and I believe, yes, both are from Councillor Rees, please.
The first one is for Councillor Yeo. I can see you're keen. Are Torvine schools on track to meet their Key Stage 4 results targets this summer?
I would have thought that after your bravura performance earlier on, you'd have had enough of asking questions, Jeff. I'm sure that either in the interest of brevity or perhaps for some other reason you'd prefer me to give you a one-word answer, but I can't do that. What I can say is that we're not unhappy where we are at the moment in the arc of progress, as it were. And that's principally because since last summer's results, we've been working more closely with the EAS in order to further strengthen their capacity to review schools' progress perhaps more accurately. This includes enhanced support from their English and Maths teams, who've been working closely with our secondary schools, ensuring that they have the support they need to accurately assess where their pupils are at any given stage. This also includes the EAS giving the schools and us their view of the accuracy or otherwise of in-school assessments. This is an important change that allows us to have a fuller picture of whether or not schools are on track. We will, of course, be reviewing the full range of evidence with the EAS in the coming weeks. Coincidentally, we start that process this afternoon with 12 rounds with the EAS upstairs, starting at 2 o'clock. As you will know, WAG have introduced a series of changes this year, which are likely to impact reported outcomes for learners. These include the changes to the assessment of maths, now 2 GCSEs, mathematics and numeracy, and English, L2+, now requires a C or better in English language, and has eschewed the importance of perhaps English literature. And the changes also in science, BTEC no longer counting, as it were. This is making the task of teachers and the EAS more difficult in respect of the new assessment, because it isn't clear yet where the grade boundaries are, thus making predictions less reliable. I have asked, as a matter of interest, the EAS to provide a briefing on these changes at their earliest convenience for all members. I can confirm that the results of the early entry maths exams are now available. Torvine schools, like those across the country, have made individual choices about who will be entered for these exams based on what is right for their learners. What this means is that results are not directly comparable between schools, nor are they directly comparable between LAs. That said, at national level, 46.1% of all pupils entered achieved a C grade or better in both maths and numeracy, while in Torvine this figure was 48.2%. I think it's worth noting that we are clearly, if you can do your sums, 2.1% better than the national average in this respect. But it's also worth commenting on the fact that these exams were undertaken last November, which puts them 6 months away from the summer exams later on in this year. The significance of that is for those pupils who either through preference or necessity need to sit or want to resit, they have 6 months further intervention and support in order to perhaps better their results. So we continue to work with the EAS in our schools to ensure that we know where each individual pupil is on their learning journey. This tells us the kind of intervention needed and where and when the intervention might be needed. We will continue to leave no stone unturned in pursuit of the best performance possible this year, regardless of the examination changes. And I have to say the examination changes don't necessarily do us many favours, that's for sure.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer. You touched on the new curriculum and the new exams being introduced. With that in mind then, is there any real metric that the Council could use to really prove whether or not our school children's results are improving year on year?
That is something that we are discussing both internally as an LEA and also dialogues with the EAS. As I referenced earlier on, we are starting a more detailed and in-depth and urgent discussion with the EAS about these issues and others this afternoon, and that will go on for quite a few weeks, and I'll get back to you on that.
This one's for the leader. Will the leader make a statement regarding the future development of Fairwater Shops?
Okay, thank you. An appraisal of Fairwater Shops and the surrounding area, which was commissioned by Bronavon and partly funded by the Council, has recently been published. The study recommends a complete redevelopment of the site. The scheme is complex, involving a largely occupied site comprising of 20 retail units, 11 residential flats and a range of other properties in various usage. Furthermore, the scheme, as proposed, shows a deficit of between £3 and £3.5 million. Officers are currently discussing with Bronavon the issues raised by the appraisal. I understand meetings have been held with local members. I'll ensure that officers meet with you and your fellow ward member as discussions proceed.
My understanding is that there is a need for the Council to support Bronavon in its progress around these development plans, and the sum of £15,000 has been mentioned. I'm asking you now, will you give a commitment to fund that £15,000 so we can get things going?
Those discussions about support are currently ongoing with Bronavon. I can't say more than that at this stage.
Thank you. Thank you, members. We're now at the point of the date of the next meeting. So for your information, the next council meeting will be on Tuesday, the 28th of February at 10 o'clock here in the Council chamber. Cabinet decisions for the 12th of December 2016 are agenda item 19, starting on page 227. There were no challenges to any of the decisions. Does anyone have any questions about them, please? So, members, are you okay to note the Cabinet decisions? Someone move that. Thank you, Nigel. Are you all happy? Thank you, members. The decisions are noted. We then have the Cabinet decisions of the 17th of January, which is item 20, and it's on page 229. Again, there were no challenges to any of these decisions. Does anyone have any questions? Right. Are you happy, members, to note the Cabinet decisions, please? Thank you. Those decisions are noted. And that is the end of this Council meeting. Thank you for your attendance and contributions. Please don't forget to sign the attendance register.